Yogaha Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hey, welcome you all. I'm Dr. Jayesh Patel, Professor, Ganpat University, VM Patel Institute of Management, Gujarat. Today, I'll be discussing with you about how to test mediation and moderation. Before moving towards mediation and moderation, it is necessary to understand what is correlation and regression. So the flow of today's presentation will be: first, you will be acquainted with the Beijing terminology, which is correlation, then regression, and after that, we are moving towards mediation and moderation. Interestingly, today's brief would be on the very first part, that is the theory, and second one is how to do an analysis with respect to the software called SPSS 20. Correlation. It describes the strength of linear association between two variables. So whenever one wishes to identify the relationship between two variables, they need to go for correlation. It is a given a fact that both the variables should be measured on ratio form or interval data form. The measure which is being used to indicate correlation is the Pearson's product moment correlation, which is denoted as small r. So when your value of R is -1, it would be termed as perfectly negative correlation. If your R is +1, it would be a perfectly positive correlation. When your R value assumes 0, it would be no association between two variables, that is technically termed as zero correlation. In a case when you have two variables involved and the purpose is to establish an association between these two variables taken, it would be a bivariate correlation to be tested. In case when you have a more than two variables involved and still the purpose is to measure the association between all those seed variables, it would be termed as multiple correlation. Now let's understand regression from the perspective of what it is and how it will advances our understanding with respect to understanding the phenomena and predicting the phenomena. So when we say regression, it will simply addresses two specific questions. One is, what is the strength of relationship, and second, what is the direction of relationship. So it will uh, also capturing the characteristics of the correlation where we are trying to find out an association between two variables. So when the purpose is testing a relationship between two variables where, as per literature, we are specifying that one is independent variable and another one is dependent variable. So in that case, the most simplest linear form of equation y is equal to beta 0 plus beta 1 x is used, where x being independent variable and y is being dependent variable. So when there are two variable involved, one is dependent variable, we normally abbreviate it as dv, and another is capital X, which is independent variable, which is abbreviated as iv. So when two variables are involved, we normally use bivariate regression. By definition, it is a procedure for deriving a mathematical relationship in the form of an equation between a single metric dependent and a single metric independent variable, that is also called predictor. So the necessary condition for performing regression is all the variables should be measured on either interval data or ratio data. For example, can the variation in market share be accounted for by the size of the sales form? Here, the variation in market share. So let me put it into a y and x form. Y is my dependent variable, which is market share, and x is my independent variable, which is the size of the sales force. On the contrary, when we say multiple regression, it involves multiple IVs together. So multiple regression is used when we have a single dependent variable and two or more than two independent variables which are measured on metric data, that is interval or ratio. For example, Can variation in sales be explained in terms of variation in advertising expenditure, prices, and level of distribution? So if I simplify here, my dependent variable in this case would be sales, while the independent variables are advertising expenditure, prices, and level of distribution. There are three IVs involved and one dependent variable, and that is why the suggestive analysis is multiple regression. If you see the mathematical form of it, y is equal to beta 0 plus beta 1 into x1 plus beta 2 into x2, so on, so forth. And finally, there will be an error. Error is the residue that is not being explained by all this independent variable taken into the system or a model to understand. What is mediation? To understand the mediation analysis, we need to talk about two variables involved. One is independent variable, that is capital X, and second one is dependent variable, that is capital Y. Consider for a while a cause X and its effect on Y. That will typically poses a research question, which is what is the effect of X on Y? So if you see the visual representation, how X affects your Y, and the relationship is always depicted in the form of total effect, that is termed as C, which is your beta coefficient. But what if we thought X affected something else that in turn affected Y? That could explain the X to Y relationship. So here graphically, if you see, X first affects M, that is your mediator, and M affects your Y. So there is a direct relationship between X and Y denoted as C days, and an indirect effect between X to M and M to Y. M is acting as a mediator within this relationship. So the total effect is calculated by summing up direct effect and indirect effect. Let me put the same relationship with the help of example. Now here, consider the situation. Does alertness mediate the relationship between sleep quality and academic performance? Considering this research question, we can get an idea that sleep quality is our independent variable, academic performance is the dependent variable, and alertness is acting as a mediator. Sleep quality first influences alertness, that in turn affect the academic performance. This is a mediation model wherein alertness is acting as the mediator. So CDS is the direct effect of sleep quality X on academic performance Y, while A is the direct effect of sleep quality on mediator alertness. When you consider B as the beta coefficient, which is the direct effect of mediator alertness on academic performance. In mediation, when we see the text or any other literature, they are saying that there are two types of mediation. One is partial, second one is full mediation. According to Baron and Kenny, 1986, they explained the first mediation approach using series of regression model. Later on, if you go visually, that sleep quality affects your academic performance through the mediating variable called alertness. If the direct effect between sleep quality and academic performance, let's say C days, is found to be non-significant, in that case it is called full mediation. So there is no direct effect, but only indirect effect is significant. So from sleep quality to alertness, that is significant, and from alertness to academic performance, while the direct effect is non-significant. In case if all these three relationship, from sleep quality to alertness and from alertness to academic performance, and also the direct effect are significant, it is considered as partial mediation. Moving forward to the mediation as a process, this slide specifically talks about what is the flow to be use or deciding whether it would be a mediation process or any other kind of relationship. So if we start with regressing y on x, that means we are proposing a research question, that is, does x predict y? If the answer is yes, we can move towards the next relationship. But if you perform the statistics and found that if the answer is non-significant, so in that case, we cannot go further. There is no ground for mediation analysis in this specific case. So it's all the time we need to check the p-value in the output, and if it is insignificant, non-significant, then it can, in that case, it does not make a sense. We cannot use mediation. If it is yes, that means the p-value is less than 0.05. You have to regress m on x. Here m is denoted as mediating variable. That also proposes the research question, which is like, does x predict m? If it is no, that means the significant value is not meeting the criteria, that is 5%. So in that case, you have to stop here. There is no ground for mediation. You cannot establish mediation relationship. If it is yes, then it will give you a green signal to go and regress y on x and m. So does x predict y? Again, through direct and indirect. So there are three possibilities. Not at all. That means if p-values gets lesser than 0.05, we conclude that it is a pool mediation. If it is partially in a smaller size and significant, it would be a partial mediation. And if it's completely predict y, that means there is no mediating effects which are there. In case of full mediation or a partial mediation, we have to test mediation effects. In a case where they are statistically significant, it is highly recommended the use of bootstrapping as a procedure. So we will discuss this specific procedure as and when we are moving towards the software use while testing mediation relationship. In nutshell, bootstrapping is a resampling process that will actually help us to improve the estimates of the relationship. After getting the basic understanding of what is mediation, how it can be proposed in the form of hypothesis, and what are the requirements with respect to the data type. As we all know, there are three uh, symbols which are used: capital X, capital Y, and capital M. So let me repeat it. Capital X is your independent variable, capital Y is dependent variable, and capital M is your mediating variable. All these three variables are necessarily measured in the form of either interval data or ratio data, that is metric data. Now let's move to how to download and use process macro in IBM SPSS. Process macro was basically developed by Mr. Hayes, and then after it is always called as Hayes process macro. So in this case, you can go to either Hayes official website for the process templates, where 72 to 96 different models are presented. So that part I will talk you to the later in the later slides. At the moment, we are talking about how to install process macro for SPSS. Fortunately, our university has a licensed version of SPSS. So at the moment, I can use SPSS for testing mediation analysis with the help of process macro. So you can go to this specific website as kind, where you can have this specific window where you can easily download your process version 4.3. So when you click on download, and if the files get downloaded, it would be coming in this way, either process version 2.11, in this case it would be process version 4.3. If you have extended, let's say SPSS has version 23 and earlier, or maybe later, we have a different mode to be used while installing in SPSS. If we have, let's say, above 23, that is 24, 25, in that case, you have to click a different button. I'll show you that part in the later slide. After installing process macro file, in your computer, you can store on the desired location. For instance, we normally save it on desktop because whenever we want to take it into a process, we can easily get it. Once you open SPSS, you will get to have utilities on the top. So this is just a menu where we can click. Analyze is a button. When you click on it, you will get the list of statistical tests to be performed. Moving forward, you will have another tab called utilities. So when you click on utilities, this dialog box will be popped up. So at the bottom, you can see custom dialog and extension bundles. So here you have to go to custom dialog. So when you click on custom dialog, another box is popped up. So where you need to click install custom dialog. So let me repeat the process. Save your process file on desktop or maybe on any other desired location where you can simply borrow it. After that, open SPSS, go to utilities. After clicking on utilities, go to custom dialogs and install custom dialog. So when you click on custom dialog, another dialog box will be popped up. When you click on custom dialog, this dialog box will be popped up. So here you can see we can easily get the file that we have stored. So I'll go to your respective folder and then select your process file and click on open. So once if you click on open, automatically it will be absorbed in SPSS. Once you feed that SPSS process file in SPSS and then you save it, after that go to analyze, go to regression. When you click on regression, another box is popped up which contains all the regression family analysis. And here you can easily see the process version 4 by Andrew F. Hayes. So whatever the version that you have downloaded, for example 3.2, 3.1, so automatically it will be displayed here. So when you click on this process, you will be directed to the analysis window. When we click on process in regression, this dialog box will be popped up where you can see this box that represent all the variable. So when you import your SPSS file or Excel file, you will be have certain variables which are there as per your questionnaire or the model. So those variables will be listed here in the box of variable. So that is one. Second box you can see where we need to specify the model number. In his process, there are almost 90 plus various models that you can select. The family would be a simple mediation model, simple moderation models. We have serial or sequential mediation, mediation moderation, or moderating mediation. So that comprises almost 90 plus different models that you can select. So statistically, we can select, we have a luxury to have almost 90 plus model to test. However, it is always subject to your literature support. For example, you are going with moderation relationship. So one relationship is moderated by X variable and the same relationship would be further moderated by another variable. So that has to be supported well by the literature. There must be a strong logical argument supporting those relationships. That is point two. By default, we are taking 95% confidence interval. Confidence interval talks about out of 100 times, 95 times, you are sure that the random observation fall into that interval. We usually take 5000 bootstrap samples if you are using bootstrapping as a procedure. In point 3, if you see the box 3, that is y variable. So here we are inserting our dependent variable. In x variable box, we are inserting independent variable. If you have one mediator or two mediator, you can insert here. So one mediator would be a simple mediation, two mediator may be sequential or serial mediation, two, three, four kind of thing. That is box number 5. If you have some covariates going for advanced relationship, you can insert some covariates here. But at the moment, we are restricting that part. We are only inserting dependent variable, independent variable, and mediating variable. But at the moment, I am trying to explain you each box with respect to what variable to be inserted in that specific box. So if you have any moderating variable, let's say when we are going for moderation analysis later on, we have to insert moderating variable here. That is denoted as W. If you have two moderating variable in your model, you can go with Z. So these are the boxes probably where we can insert variables, and you can see in between there is a shift button. So the transfer button, when you select a variable and when you click on that shift button, it will be shifted to your respective box. And after that, you have to click on option button. So when you click on option button, another dialog box will be popped up. So when you click on option button, this box will be popped up where you can select certain options. If it is mediation analysis, you can go with total effect model, you can go with pairwise contrast of indirect effect, standardized effects, right? If you go with higher level of mediation moderation, you can also select test for X by M interaction, right? So this part we will discuss as and when the required model which we are going to go for testing. Simultaneously, you need to also select in this specific moderation and conditioning part, this minus 1 SD, mean and plus 1 SD. So these are the three levels at the low level, moderate level, and higher level. What are the relationship which are there? We normally select Johnson name or output. This is purely being used when we are going with moderation analysis. In mediation, we don't need this, but yes, let me have a clue on that specific part. So I've explained all these possible boxes which are there that can be used while testing mediation. Now going towards understanding the mediation analysis with the help of a case study. In this part, I am going to discuss a research study that we have completed with my colleagues, Dr. Anirudh Pengarkar and Dr. Sampath Kumar. Both are the existing professor at University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, America. In this case, we have talked about simple mediation using a two variable. Dependent variable would be the EWM engagement, that is electronic word of mouth engagement on social media. The independent variable is need for status, and the mediator is luxury brand involvement. Before moving towards the main model, let me explain that only running mediation, and if your argument with respect to that theory development is stronger, you can easily get the publication. This paper gets published in the journal called Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services, which is Scopus Indexed, Web of Science Indexed, Scopus Q1, Australian Business Deans Council APTC rated this journal as A, and ABS rated this journal as 2. As we all know, in luxury consumption, most of the luxury brands are going with so many tangibles communication that they are making with social media. Nowadays, there is a rise in social media, and brand marketers need to utilize that platform in order to create word of mouth. Earlier, it was so traditional and so physical. We were talking about physical word of mouth. Today, as the communication on social media has received a great attention and also took part in the practice, and because of that, consumers have started sharing their views, their likes, dates, their positive reviews about that specific brand, whatever they are using in the domain of luxury on social media. That ultimately getting reflected into word of mouth of social media. Interestingly, luxury, when we say luxury, It is a premium product where the consumer involvement is very, very high. The interest level, and because of the interest level, the effort that they are putting into to search, to acquire information about the luxury brand, and finally comparing all the possible alternatives which are available will lead the purchase. That is why it is so important in order to take luxury brand involvement in the process of getting this relationship stronger. As per the literature, in this specific paper, we talked about need for status as the independent variable and the strongest predictor of online word of mouth engagement on social media. If you feel that the particular luxury brand is actually satisfying your status needs, in that case, you are more prone to share a positive views about that specific luxury brand on social media. So this would be serving as our main hypothesis, H1, that suggests need for status positively associated, or you can say influencing, e-word of mouth engagement. After that, we are bringing luxury brand involvement as a mediator in this specific model. So that will stress two hypotheses, S2A and S2B. According to S2A, there is a positive relationship between luxury brand involvement and inclination to engage in EWM behavior. While S2B talks about luxury brand involvement mediates the relationship between need for status and inclination to engage in EWM behavior on social media for luxury consumer. So there is a direct effect hypothesis between need for status and EWM. And there is an indirect hypothesis suggesting luxury brand involvement is acting as a mediator between these two. Therefore, the main hypothesis for this study is the H1, that specifically talks about a positive relationship between need for status and engagement with respect to EWOM in the case of luxury consumption. Here, the attempt was made by us to prove that this is the central hypothesis, and after testing this relationship, we are trying to prove that luxury brand involvement as a mediator that will change the relationship between this two variable. So the discussion in this case, if we talk about literature, focuses more on how this relationship can be established. And if you focus in the first paragraph, we tried to define what is need for status, and then we tried to justify that how need for status will lead to the apprehension with respect to the consumers and the kind of admiration that they are creating. Post that, in the second paragraph, we try to address that the process through which self or need for status would affect the gain behavior or the loose behavior. And later on, it would be established in the case of luxury consumption that how need for status would affect the word of mouth that the consumers would seek with respect to the luxury brand. And we try to see that in the introduction of the literature, H1 is established, and in the next section, we have introduced our mediator, that is luxury brand involvement. Based on that, S2A and S2B were developed with an argument that luxury brand involvement would be serving or acting as a mediator in this relationship. So if I'm saying that if the mediation would be full, we were expecting that the indirect relationship would be significant and direct relationship would be insignificant. If we'll get all these three relationships significant, we can conclude that it would be partial mediation. So how to perform the analysis? So before moving towards the SPSS analysis with process macro, let me brief you about the methodology that we adopted in this luxury case study. We identified our target population consisting the Mexican consumer. So we collected data using an online panel data provider called Prolific, which is United Kingdom based online data online data service provider, and which has a large survey pool consisting of global participants from several different countries. When we compare Prolific with the another well-known online panel data provider called Amazon MTurk, Mechanical Turk, Prolific offers low sample bias and better sample representativeness when you compare it with Amazon MTurk. And because of that, it recruits respondents from diverse participant pool that will give you a better selection possibilities. To ensure the inattentive participants, from that we use certain reality check questions. So from that we automatically identify that few respondents were not with their active mode of learning while filling up the data. They were excluded, and the agency called Prolific, which has actually give those data recollected. Here, the argument that you mentioned in the literature, in line with that, we are going to test the very first hypothesis, that is X to Y relationship. For that, we are going to use linear equation called regression, bivariate regression, to test that whether there is a positive and significant relationship between these two variables or not. And after that, we are heading towards testing this mediation analysis in process macro. Here, I have opened up the SPSS file for the data luxury emerging markets. The data collected were from Mexico. Now here if you see, there are two views. One is variable view and another one is data view. I understand that the audience is mixed, so let me brief you about how to use SPSS for defining variable and for entering data into this file. So when we click on variable view, this kind of uh, interface is open. So first you have to define the variable. I already entered the variables which are there, which are relevant with respect to the study. The demographics are gender, age, marital status, education, income, that is on an annual basis. And then it is the multi-item scale for need for status. We have a few more variable need for uniqueness. That way we have gone with. In gender, if you observe the name of variable, we use either underscore or it would be a continuous. If you keep a space in between two words, it would be considered as illegal character. So avoid use of illegal character like comma, semicolon, space, slash, because those symbols SPSS will not accept. Second is the type of variable. So in most of the cases, if we talk about my area of research, I always encounter the numeric data, and normally we convert those data into numbers, and that is why we have to all the time select numeric. Width and decimal, that depends upon the data size. So this is just, you can go with, let's say if it's gender, so 1 and 2 would be the answer, so width 1 would be okay. So here I can also change, it would be 1 or 2, whatever. I mean, if I know the answer would be in specific decimal, that way you have to go with. Values you can determine. So when you click on values, a box is popped up where you can code the values that you have used. So 1 I've used as male, and 2 I have used as female. So after writing this, you have to add this variable. So now this is complete. So here we have actually changed the descriptor to the number. Otherwise, software, if you have not defined even, still the computer will take 1 and 2. Finally, we need to also measure the type of scale, the measure. So in principle, if you refer any text, we have defined measurement scales into 4. levels: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. In SPSS, scale assumes interval and ratio. So here gender is a nominal data, so we need to select nominal. This way we have actually entered all this variable, right? So the moment I'm shifting from variable view to data view, you can see the variables are listed on the top. So the moment you pick any one questionnaire, so one is your respondent one, the very first questionnaire. So insert all the values horizontally and then go to the next respondent. So this way we have taken all this variable. Now, as I already mentioned, need for status here is a multi-item. Brand involvement is a multi-item scale. So here first we need to take the average of all the items which are being measured under the construct called need for status. So to do so, I need to go to transform. You can also remember the path for taking average, or you can use Excel where you can take the average and just import the data here. So in case of taking average, you need to go to transform, then go to compute variable, right? So just I'm resetting this. So here my variable is need for status. I'm just giving you my code because this is not going to be even reported. In reporting, we always use need for status, the full variable name. Please make a habit, whatever the output that you have from any kind of software, while reporting, it should be well edited, formatted, customized data table with legends where you inform readers about certain statistics with respect to certain parameter. So here, this is like a numerical calculator. So select bracket and then select one by one the item, each item of that scale. So here we are talking about need for status. So I coded it as NFS 1 to 5. So first is to be shifted, then add with the second item. Again, you have to shift it, then add to the third item, transfer, shift, fourth item, transfer, shift, and right after that I already entered all five items, so let me divide it by 5 because the need for status in this case is measured with 5 items. So when you click on it, the command is executed, and when you see the last column, you will get the average of it. So now this is the variable that we have just created in this. So similarly you can go with all these three variable, right? So if you see, for example, we need three variable EWM, then need for status, and luxury brand environment. So these three variables are of importance at the moment. So in line with the theory, the very first hypothesis is H1. So let's check whether the hypothesis is significant and positive. So for that we need to go to analyze, regression, and linear, because at the moment we are not testing the mediation, we are testing only the main hypothesis because that is the argument. So we actually sequentially put the argument that first H1 is significant, and then we introduced mediator in the system, and because of that, later on, the main hypothesis remain non-significant. That would be full mediation. So that is the perspective to test. We need to check that whether it is a full mediation or a partial mediation. So here, let's check the very first hypothesis. So go to regression, go to linear, then a box is popped up. If you see, dependent variable and independent variables are clearly defined as the legend. So let me enter. Hmm, Need for status is my independent variable, and EWM is my dependent variable, right? After that, you have to go to statistics, select descriptive, select collinearity, and then select continue and go to OK. You will get certain outputs. So where my earlier session, I talked about what is to be checked when we are going with the regression. So very first part is model fit. So for model fit, by default, we have ANOVA output. So this F value with respect to the significant value, this value should be less than 0.05. And in this case, the data depicts is the value is less than 0.05. That means model is fat. The next part is the model summary. You just check it out, R square value. So X predicts Y to an extent 24.1%. So that is model's explanatory power. After that, you just check it out, your coefficient, where we know that VIF is 1, which is less than 5. Here we have only one independent variable, so collinearity does not make a sense. Now let me tell you what is collinearity. If we talk about a model, a dependent variable having more than two or three independent variable, two or more than two independent variable. So theoretically, we are proposing that both IVs are conceptually different, but yes, they are measuring the same dependent variable. So while measuring those two construct which are taken as independent variable, it is needed to check that whether they are overlapping in terms of measurement or not. If some of the item of variable 1 and variable 2 are overlapping, that means they are measuring the similar kind of thing, or maybe respondent perceive those items similar. So in that case, the model's validation would be questionable. So before moving towards that, we need to always check multicollinearity if we have more than two independent variable involved, right? That would be a biggest concern when we are moving to moderation. In moderation, your independent variable influences dependent variable, and simultaneously your moderator also influencing your dependent variable. So where multicollinearity has to be checked. So here you can see from the significant need for status, and the dependent variable is EWM. If you can see, significant value is less than 0.05, which is just below the threshold value of 5%. That means the relationship is found to be significant. Here you can see the T value, which is very positive. That means the relationship hold in this case is positive. The beta value is 0.491. So we can say that need for status is explanatory uh, value in terms of EWM is at least 0.491. So this is how we have checked the very first hypothesis. Now let's go to the mediation. For that, you need to go to analyze, regression, and uh, process macro. So here your Y is EWM, mediator is luxury brand involvement, need for status would be your independent variable. So three variables we have added, EWM as dependent, need for status as X, that is independent, and luxury brand involvement as mediator. Now we have a list of models that I've already talked about. More than 90 models are there as proposed by Andrew Hayes. So here the document is available on Andrew's his website, where which model depicts what kind of relationship. Even I'll be sharing the link at the end once my session gets over. When you click on that link, you will be redirected to all those models. So let me tell you that the model that we are talking about X to Y, and there is one mediator present in between. Model 4 is aptly representative to explain that relationship. So we need to select model 4. So please, before moving to this side, first select model number. So as later on you are not supposed to redo the analysis. The confidence interval by default is 95%, bootstrapping is 5000. Now let's move to the option part. So here let me talk about, we have multiple options here, right? So out of those we need to select few, because there are few options which are applicable for moderation. Here we are only testing mediation. If it is mediation moderation, so you have to select all. But in case of mediation only, you can go with show covariance matrix, show total effect, pairwise contrast, and standardized effect. This four option would suffice the purpose. This box is absolutely applicable for moderation. So here we are not going to go with this. So let me click on continue and OK. So script is running. We are supposed to get the output very soon. Yeah. So when you see the output, very first part talks about the descriptor of the model. So model for is use, y is your dependent variable, x is your independent variable, and m is your mediator. So you can also reconfirm whether you have added the variable as per your theory, your model is not. The sample size taken is 453. Now, in mediation, if you see the model, there are there is only one dependent variable, that is y. In our case, it is EWOM, and there are two independent variables. But if you see closely, you will find that our S to A talks about uh, need for status positively affects luxury brand involvement. So in that case, luxury brand involvement is acting as an outcome variable. So that relationship will be depicted here. This is only for those relationship for assuming luxury brand involvement as an outcome variable. So here you can see the F value subject to is P value, which is less than 0.05. Model is fit. R square is 55.15%. This is amazingly well. And this is the relationship that we can pick. So need for status is your IV. The coefficient value is 688. This is standardized standard error. T value is 23.5479. So this is positive. P value is less than 0.05. That means it is significant. The lower level of confidence interval and upper level of confidence interval values says that the zero does not fall in between. So there are two indicators to gauge that, to check that whether the relationship is significant or not. The p value, certain statistics you will get the p value. So from that you can easily know that. And then there is a second part, from the intervals lower limit and upper limit, we can easily derive whether the zero falls in between or not. Now moving towards, this is the beta value, the standardized coefficient for that relationship. So beta for need for status 2 luxury brand enrollment relationship is zero point 0.7 for 26. And then for the second outcome variable, which is EWOM, you can also see the F value, which comes as significant. The P value is less than 0.05. R square goes to 37.83%. And these are our two hypotheses, right? So need for status 2 EWOM. Now we see that the T value with respect to P value, it now comes as non-significant. So earlier it was significant, that we tested with the binary regression. Now in mediation, this relationship holds non-significant. And you can see the zero falls in between. This is minus to plus the value ranges where zero falls into this. For luxury brand enrollment, the T value is 9.97, P value is less than 0.05. This clearly indicates that the relationship is positive. So if I conclude in this case, right, we have direct and indirect. So if I say from need for status, so this first table tell that need for status to luxury brand enrollment is significant. This table says that luxury brand enrollment to EWM is significant, while the direct link is insignificant. So we conclude that the relationship in this case, specifically I'm saying mediation, is full. And when you see the beta for need for status, it is 0.797, and for luxury brand enrollment, it is 0.5531. Now, the last part, which is the most important part, the indirect effect. We know the value, but we don't know whether the indirect effect x to m and m to y, the whole set of relationship is significant or not. So for that, you need to go into total effect model. So this is just let me, yeah, now this one, total direct and indirect effects of x and y. So there are a lot of values which are there in the output. You have to select and use certain important one. So here we know that there's a total effect, there's a direct effect, and there's an indirect effect. But looking at the hypothesis testing, the important part that we need to showcase, I mean we need to report in the document, is indirect effect. So this part you can see, indirect effect would standard estimate, standard error, sorry, would lower limit of confidence interval, would higher level of, sorry, upper level of confidence interval. Now here you can see this is your effect value, and this is total indirect effect. I'm saying in that way. Here, if you see, 0 did not fall in these two values. And that is why we can conclude that the indirect effect is also significant. So this table has to be reported. Otherwise, the reviewer would ask you to produce this data. So this is just an output of simple mediation relationship. In the last part of this session, we will understand what is moderation. Up till now, we talked about mediation, that basically a form of regression with a purpose to explain the relationship. In case of moderation, it is another third variable that affects the relationship of the predictor and outcome variable. So by and large, mediation talks about explaining the relationship pattern. Moderation talks about how the third variable affects the existing relationship. So it implies an interaction on the different level of M. M being here is a moderating variable. So we assume that X influences Y based on the literature. So there is again your strong H1 saying that this relationship is uh, very stronger and with the logic that why it is to be tested right now. In this case, if you see diagrammatically, moderator is added into this model, which is denoted as dotted line. And this is just perpendicular to the horizontal line. This is just a graphical representation of how moderating relationship would be shown in the model. So, in principle, there will be three hypotheses which are going to be formed. So, your literature review section specifically go in this progressive way. First section should talk about your main hypothesis, that is what is the effect of X on Y. Once you prove that, after that you are introducing moderating variable into the relationship. So second hypothesis naturally be what is the effect, or you can say moderating variable affects the dependent variable. And the third would be the interaction, that is your independent variable and your moderating variable. So the interaction of X and MO would affect Y. So two direct effect and one interaction effect would be tested when we say testing of moderation. Here, if you see, there are two variables simultaneously affecting your dependent variable y. And that is why we need to also talk about multicollinearity. We expect that, and there is an assumption that whenever you go for a moderation, make sure your independent variable and dependent variable should be interval or ratio. In the experimental set of research, most of the time we are taking X as a categorical, but Y has to be dependent. So Y must be your interval or ratio. X can be metric or non-metric, that is nominal or ordinal. Moderating variable can be categorical as well as metric. So here, when we say two independent variables are progressed or regressed in moderation analysis over Y, we need to check whether multicollinearity exists or not. This is the second assumption. So if multicollinearity exists, it will be a serious threat to the validity of the results. And that is why make sure the data should be free from multicollinearity. So that I've already shown in the multiple regression that how we can check multicollinearity, and the indicator is variance inflation factor VIF. So for each independent variable that you have taken or assumed for the purpose of your research should have less than 5. Other texts are also advocating in between less than 3 or less than 2. So that depends of which text that you are referring. But more or less, if it is less than 5, that would be great. So in this case, I've just given an example to understand that does cyberbullying moderate the relationship between self-esteem and well-being. This is the hypothesis that we normally propose to address the moderating influence. Here, from this hypothesis, or you can say research question, not the hypothesis, this is just a research question. In this case, self-esteem is our independent variable, well-being is the dependent variable. We believe that self-esteem positively influences your well-being. And then we talk about the digital environment where people are being bullied or maybe written negative of, or a lot of things which are happening on social media and other platforms. That is cyberbullying. So in the presence of cyberbullying, the relationship gets weakened or strengthened. So, if we look at literature, we know that the relationship gets distracted, going down when we talk about cyberbullying. So, cyberbullying would be taken as moderating variable in this specific case. So, in the next slide, I'm continuing with the example that I've uh, started in this session, that is luxury consumption. So, continue with the same luxury example. We are going with the same relationship, luxury brand involvement to EWM. This is the hypothesis, and X and Y is clear in this case. If you can see this graphical representation, X being the luxury brand involvement, Y being the EWM. So frequently you observe that I'm changing X and Y. So that is how the nature of model always demands. Here we introduce authentic pride as a moderator. We believe that consumer with higher authentic pride would have a stronger relationship between X and Y as compared to consumer with a lower authentic pride. This is my hypothesis. This is the way that it is actually pronounced. And here, if you see, there are three relationships to be tested, three hypotheses specifically. H1 is involvement affects EWM. Second hypothesis S2, pride affects EWM, and third, that is involvement multiplied by pride affects your EWM. So these are the three hypotheses that we are going to test. So after this, I'll be opening up the SPSS data file and I'll be showing you that how moderation analysis with respect to haze can be performed and how the outputs can be interpreted. Now you can see the SPSS file open on the screen. So we are continuing with the same exercise, same data set, so you can establish the connect. Let me remind you that luxury brand involvement I am taking as independent variable. EWOM is taking as dependent variable, and authentic pride I am introducing it as moderating variable. So let's go with this exercise. Again, the same path that we are supposed to go with: analyze, regression, and process. So when you click on the process, the all the data would be there. So let me remove all this old information. Okay, so now let's reintroduce the variables. EWOM is my dependent variable, X is my involvement, luxury brand involvement, and now mediator, covariate, these two boxes are not needed because we are not performing that. We need to have a moderator variable to be introduced. So authentic pride, the average score of authentic pride would be used. Yes, this one. So that has to be used here. The model would be number one. Model one is a simple moderation analysis. Let me tell you that. In option, we normally select all because we know that which are the values that we are supposed to take. This section is equally important. In moderation, we always go with the different level. So exactly at the average, the mean level, and the minus one standard deviation and plus one standard deviation. So above mean and below mean. So there will be three levels for which the relationship will be tested. And we use Johnson-Neyman output in order to see that whether the each level the relationship is hold significant or not. So that would be an add-on information that would help us to understand that at which level the relationship is stronger or weaker will provide an important insights for decision making. So let me click on continue and click on OK. So the script is running. We have to wait for a couple of seconds. Yes. Now they are showing an error. Variable name should be no more than 8 character in length. So if you observe, authentic pride is just lengthier than the required word count. So let me change it. Let's go to the data variable, and if you see the authentic pride, it is too long, so let me change it to capture this AUPR, so that will suffice the purpose, I guess. Let me save it. Let's go to again regression process. Now automatically you can see the variable name has changed. So rest of the things should be same. Model 1 options all tick, and here interpretation -1 SD, mean and +1 SD, along with Johnson Neymar output is there, which is ticked. Let me click on continue. Let me click on OK. Yeah. So again, the script is running, and I'm hopeful that we are going to receive an output. Yeah. Now you can see model 1, and these are the descriptor. What is Y, what is X, and what is W. This is your sample size. This is for EWM, your main dependent variable, and if you closely observe the model fit and the significant value. So model is fit, R square is 39.49%. If I'll go with the same regression family interpretations. So first you need to always check model fit and is significant. If model is not fit, we cannot proceed further. Now I'm going with this, right? So your IV, now we have three hypotheses, H1, H2, and the interaction. If you closely observe, you can see the same word. Luxury, this is H1, your, independent variable with T and P. This value is found to be non-significant. While authentic fried is also coming as non-significant. But if you see interaction, fortunately it is coming at significant, right? So we can at least say that if I use this, because my purpose is to test the moderation effect, not this two. Because when you look at the literature, the discussion part, where the majority of the text putting in the argumentative way, saying that there is an interaction effect in the presence of this moderating variable, the relationship gets stronger. And the similar results we are going to get here. The p-value is significant, the t-value is positive. So we can say that the moderation effect is positive and significant. So that is one, this output has to be used. The third line interaction, and that is what we are all the time putting into research papers. Now if you see the different levels, right, we have the moderator at three levels, right? So at each level you can easily find out the effect. You can see this is the low, average value, and higher effect, standard error, t value, and p value. So all these three level, you can see the p value is significant. And then if you want to create a diagram, you can use these values to create the slope for the moderation analysis. So let me show you that part, how it can be done. Give me a second. So there is a standard macro tool available. We normally call it test tool package, which can be used for deriving the diagram for moderation analysis. So let me enable the editing. You can see, just check it out at the bottom. There's a validity master, chi-square difference. If you want to go and compare two models, right, for multi-group analysis, two-way interaction. Yes, this diagram we are going to use for the group difference check, fit check, effect size check, data screening. If you want to remove missing values and all those things, that can be done here. Heterogeneity at some time, at some point, right? If any reviewer asks for it, you can use this. So let me directly take you to two-way interaction. So here my independent variable is, everyone knows, luxury, brand, involvement. You have to write full, because now this will allow you to have this. This is authentic pride, and dependent variable is your variable, that is EWOM. Now from the output, let me switch over. We need to take the unstandardized regression coefficient from independent variable. Yes, so that is taken from this. Your independent variable is luxury brand involvement. The coefficient value is 1431. This is unstandardized 0.1431. So let me copy here 0.1431. For moderator, that is your right, that is minus 0.0912. is minus 0.0912 point 0, sorry. And then interaction, you can see in the same, it is 0.0967. So this would be 0.0967. And if you see the simultaneously the relationships are getting changed. Yeah, you can see this is the diagram that you can copy and you can paste it. Let me just zoom it down. Yes. So this is at low level of luxury brand enrollment, at high level, and there is a moderate. So we are talking about two extreme. The EWM would change. If you see the blue color talks about consumer with low authentic pride. The red color shows consumer with high authentic pride. Right. So consumer with high authentic pride, the relationship gets, you can see the slope. It gets stronger as compared to the consumer with low authentic price. So you can use this slope analysis in order to report in your Word file. So that was my last point to discuss, that is related to moderation. Let me thank for giving me an opportunity to UGC HRDC who are conducting such kind of refresher programs. Uh, I'm also appreciating the kind of coordination that I've received for this specific program. Importantly, such kind of refreshment programs, I'm sure, would help you to enhance your knowledge in your domain. I hope this session would be at least serve the purpose to apply mediation analysis and moderation analysis for your purpose. Thank you very much. If you have any query, you can write to this specific email. Thank you very much.